Hi there. I'm just looking to see if it's connected to YouTube okay, because this is the first time I've used this new service, so I'm just having a quick look. I've got the camera in front of me and the laptop to the side, so just bear with us a second while I just make sure everything's all good. It looks fine from what I can see. If there's anyone watching live, would you be able to just maybe drop a comment in to let us know if the sound is okay? We've been messing about and testing the sounds this morning. We just wanted to check if everything was sounding good, because that's the issues we've had previously when we've been going direct to Facebook. So we're trying something a little bit different this month. I think we're all good. It's looking fine. So if anyone has any problems, just drop a comment in to the chat, and we'll just try and keep an eye on that, and I'll try and chat with you and keep up to date with any comments. It's a bit awkward because it's at the side of me, but anyway, we'll crack on and see where we're up to. So this is month 3 of Sparkle and Shine, and I'm doing the large quilt. So today I'm going to run through all the sewing for what is included with month's clue. So if you're doing a large on the Sparkle and Shine mystery quilts, then I'm actually sewing the quartz colourway, which is the Tula pink, but it's the same thing for any of the large ones. Obviously the colour charts that you have represent which colours you're using in place of mine. If you're doing quartz, then obviously it'll look the same as yours. I've seen quite a few blocks already popping up from, I think the blocks went out just over a week ago, so some people have already cracked on, which is lovely to see. But if you're hanging on to them, or if you're going to sew along live today, then welcome. Hope you're ready for this. So I have already had a quick look and been organised this month, and I've had a look through my box, and as I recommend, you have a chart on the front of your clue that details all the pieces you should have in the box for this month. And just to clarify, someone on one of the Facebook groups, because obviously Sheila's got the Worldwide Mystery Quilt Facebook group, and someone I don't get mine in a box and I don't get the little tags, but that's just because that's how I run this club here in the UK. So if you're watching in America or New Zealand, and maybe you go through Cotton Cuts, you get slightly different things with your clubs. I think you get a few things right at the beginning. These are just little things that I do for my customers here in the UK, so sorry if it's a little bit different, but yeah, it's just how I package it. So they come in a nice little green box that goes through our postal system very easy, and hopefully gets through everyone's letterboxes. So as I was saying, I've already gone through and checked off all my pieces to make sure I've got everything that I need today. So I'm just going to lay them all out so I'm ready to start sewing. And in this month's clue, we're actually sewing 8 of the same block. So in essence, it should be very easy. It could be that you do one block just to see that you're happy with it, that you know what you're doing and you're happy with all the instructions. Or if you're a bit like me, you could just chain piece the lot as we go, which is how I'm going to do it. So if that's something new to you, then obviously I can show you how I would do something like this. But I still take the instructions step by step. It's just that as we go through each step, I will do it for the same thing for each of the 8 blocks. I just find it makes it a little bit quicker for me, and that's how I prefer to do it. But if you want to take it one block at a time, it's probably a little bit slower, but it might make more sense to you, especially if you're just starting out and this is something completely new to you. Because I do know this time around I've got quite a few new sewers with me, and also a few brand new to quilting, and the mystery quilt is a perfect kit to start you off, because as you all know, it comes pre-cut, so there's that element taken away from it. So I'm just going to double check on the on the YouTube comments, make sure everyone's happy that's in there, and then I will start laying out from clue 1. So just give me 1 second. I'm just going to just pop a comment in here just to make sure the comment section's working, because that's something new to me. all this YouTube thing is new to me, so we're just getting used to what I do. So, starting off, get me a little colour chart so I know exactly what I'm doing and which pieces I need. So, instructions are to take a triangle B, which are my turquoise ones, for quartz, and a square C. And it says here we're making 16, so I'm using all of 16 pieces, and I'm going to be attaching the triangle to the right hand side of the square. So as I said in previous months, I always lay it out so that I know that it looks like the image, just a visual way of checking that it looks right. And then what I will do is I will flip that over. Obviously for me these solid fabrics are the same on either side, so it doesn't really matter which way I pick it up, but if it's patterned fabric you need to make sure you're putting them right sides together. And then I know that I'm going to be sewing down this straight edge here because that's where I want my join to be. So I can pile them all up and get them all ready for sewing in one go. And just put them on the bed of my machine there. I'll just roughly lay them on and then I'll neaten them up as they're going into the under the needle in the sewing machine. I've just got them roughly in place so I know that they're in the right direction. And you'll see with these pieces they've got a pattern to them, and this is the little skunk print. So you can see there's one there with a head and a body, but I'm really not bothered about direction on these or which way they're going. If that's something that's important to you, it's going to be a little bit difficult because you don't know which way this block is going to appear. You can do it so that you look at the image of the block and you see that you've got a C block here and a C block here, and you can see one's going to be one way and one's going to be the other way. So if you want, for instance, you can see you've got two skunk bodies, you could make sure that you've got one going either way with the fabric on either side, like so. And then when it's in the block, that one will actually be turned that way, so it will be the right way up, and at least they'll be the same way within that block. But honestly, I'm just going to go with however they land, however they fall, so I may end up with upside down decapitated skunk bodies, but that's the beauty of patchwork. I'm not sure my dad would agree. He thinks we're all a bit crazy. So nice and easy is this because I had 16 of these to start with and we're sewing all 16 together. So when I get to the bottom of this pile, if I've got it right, I shouldn't have any of either of these particular pieces left. If you open your boxes and you find that you're short of any pieces or there's any problems with any of the pieces cut, you know, I've said before that I do all of the cutting and all of the packing, and I do make mistakes occasionally, and I've had a couple this month where one lady just got in touch with me and said she was missing just a few items, so I just got them in the post to her the next day. It's a bit of a delay if you're hoping to sit down and sew straight away, but you know, it does happen sometimes. So if the best thing to do, and I can recommend you do, is when the box arrives, is to open it up and check that everything is in there, even if you're not planning to sew it straight away, even if you're planning to put the box aside for maybe 4 or 5 months and do a whole load together, because at least if you know everything's in there and packed away and ready to sew when you want it, you're not going to then have a delay if you need to get an extra piece from me, or if there's anything wrong with it at all. I recommend checking it over as soon as it arrives. So I am now going to just run these under the machine, so I'll just scoot over here. I've already tested my seam allowance on the machine, so that should be all good to go for me. And you know that I recommend every time you're doing one of these is to just retest your seam allowance, just so that you know it is sewing at a 1/4 inch or Sheila's scant 1/4 inch. And then I don't cut the fabrics, I don't cut the threads I do just get to the end of that first block and then put my next block straight underneath, so that they're just in a chain, one after the other. It saves on a little bit of thread, and it saves massively on time if you do it this way. In Sheila's instructions she does say to do all 16 at once, so it's a shame with the lives we can't fast forward this little bit that's just me sat at the sewing machine there. Sewing away, but it does give you an idea of actually how long the blocks take to put together. If you do just sit down and sew them all in one go all together, I tend to find that they don't take too long to do at all. Right, almost there. There's 3 more to go. If you are sewing up the small clue, you may have seen that Emma pop up in the Facebook group. She's Studio 77. There's a link in the Facebook group, but she's certainly done a video running through the latest small clue, and she's doing the Sphinx colourway. Which is the Juicy Juice prism line, which is all the greens just above my head here. Right. Plug mine in. There we go. So, as you will know if you've joined me before, you will know that Sheila always gives us instructions on which way to press the blocks. So for this particular one we're pressing towards C, which is the square. So what we'll do is I'll turn them over so they're all laid with the square on top. I'll do a few at a time. Then I can put them under my pressing block, my clapper. So I like to just gently press first of all on top of the stitches to set the seam, and then I just nudge into the seam and press it flat. And I'm just doing that to avoid putting any tiny crease in, so I'm not really ironing, because we're not supposed to iron, I am pressing, but I'm just nudging the tip of the iron just into the seam, just to make sure that when I do press down, I'm not creating a little ridge or like a pucker in the seam, which is very easy to do. So just set the stitches and then just kind of roll it over with my finger and just the tip of the iron, and then press down. Next 3, 1, 2, 3. That way is easier. I like to try and do things all the same way, and then I know what I'm doing. So press, press, press. Nudge the seam. I'm about halfway there now. Turn them the other way. Just checking if anyone that was watching had any questions while we're live. I'm not sure if anyone is actually doing their own sewing this Sunday afternoon, or whether you just sat watching to pick up some tips or actually see what the blocks look like. Just got 4 left to do, and then we can move on to step 2. Right then. I'll just push them out of the way for the moment, because I've got a feeling. Oh no, I'm attaching the next piece to those. Sometimes we move on and do another item, but yes, we're going to take triangle F, which for me is the yellowy limey green colour. In fact, I can't remember what this one's called. Pear, I think it is. One of Tula Pink solids I'm using, and I'm attaching that to the bottom of C. So I end up with a piece that's going to look like this. So lay it out like that, and then flip it over, and I'm going to be sewing along this seam. Now I would, because I've pressed my seam under C going that way, I would run these into the machine this way, just so that it keeps that seam under going the right way when it goes through the machine. I'll see if I can show you when I go to the machine with that. So yeah, so again 16 of those, because all these blocks are going to be identical at this point. I'm not sure when we get to the next bit if the next section flips, because sometimes it does. So again, if you were particular about a particular fabric maybe facing one way or the other, you might want to, at this point you should have already turned your fabrics round, so you'll be adding it to the same point anyway. Yeah, so a lot of repetition in this month for the large clue, which actually is quite nice. not having to think too much about doing lots of different things. Sometimes we have a couple of different blocks. That are completely different as well, but yeah, unusually this month we've got 8 blocks and they're all the same, so I'm liking these colours together as well. I mean, I know the quilt is designed to go together, but now seeing them together and sewing them together, they do look lovely. I'm just laying them all out so they all look the same, ready to put into the sewing machine. There we go. I'll just scoot over to the machine, and whilst I'm doing that I'll check if everything's okay over on the YouTube. I'm hoping it's all working okay. Everything looks fine. So I'm just going to take from a pile and just work through them again. So I've got 16 to work through. I'm just making sure that I'm going to be sewing down here, and I'm just making sure that these edges are lined up nice and neat. Got a little bit of a loose thread there, but I'll just chop that off as I go. That might be a little bit short, might that triangle. It might have cut off a little bit. I had a bit of a problem die when I started cutting my test samples out, and I bought a brand new one a few weeks back, so hopefully yours are all okay. Yeah, that's good. So just neaten them up as I take them to the needle. If you're not so keen on getting your finger too close to the machine, I must say it doesn't bother me, but you can use little tools. I've shown you before my little stiletto that I use when I'm trying to keep things in line. It's just got a really long point to it. It's nice for holding fabrics down, and it's also useful for holding your seams down that are underneath. So if you're maybe sewing against the seam, you can use a little stiletto point just to make sure that it's laying flat and it's not going to flip under. I don't know if any of you who are doing the Sparkle and Shine mystery quilt, obviously we're only into month 3, but the other mystery quilt I'm running that runs 6 months in advance, so I run one every 6 months for Sheila. That's almost coming to an end. It's month 10 next month, so I've just released the optional borders and backings that you can get for your kits. So if you're brand new to Mystery Quilt, you could maybe go check out my other video. I've just put up a video recently explaining what was sent out with the Are You Game Mystery Quilt Clue 9, and it was all about the borders and backing instructions, and I kind of talk you through what's included in that and how it all works, and maybe for anyone who is brand new to quilting. I know when I first started quilting there was some terminology I just didn't understand, and obviously without Google you struggle, don't you? So at least nowadays you can Google stuff. But I did a little video just explaining how I calculated the backing measurements. With my lovely little DIY paper cutout drawing of the different size quilts. Maybe for anyone that's a bit scared of quilt maths and struggles to work things out, it might just help explain how it works in my mind anyway. That's how I work things out. I like to draw things out and write things down. Right, nearly at the end of this. Okay, so the instructions now say, I'm pressing towards C again, so I'm pressing back towards the centre square. There's the little snips. Move those out of the way. Bring this forwards. Do some at the top. Should be able to do 2 rows at once. So pressing towards C, so I want my seam to be underneath C. Got a few loose threads here as well, so they are something that I would trim off as I go, and the thread that I started with I would trim that as well, just because when I get to the month 10 and I'm putting all these blocks together, it's so much easier if I've not got loads of loose threads from when I was sewing the blocks. Obviously this is like month 3, so it'll be sat in its little bag for another 6 months or so before it comes out and is put together with all the other blocks. And the last thing I want is to get everything out and then find I've got loads of loose threads to trim off. Pile those up. So if you've not watched the previous video, the block that I'm using here is just a solid wood block that's called a clapper. It was first introduced to me in dressmaking, but a lot of quilters are using them now, and the idea is to press my seams on the top, so I'm pressing the stitches initially to set the stitches, and then flip my seam over and I'm pressing the seam, and the idea is that then the clapper you place on top of your pressed seam, and it helps take out the heat, and it absorbs the heat from the seam to help it set quicker. And obviously it's a solid block as well, so it's putting weight on it, and it just helps give it a nice crisp finish. So I tend to try and do 2 or 3 together and just put them in a line. Maybe doesn't work when I've got a few piled up together like so, but it was a little investment for me when I started this most recent mystery quilt. So I've not been using any starch sprays or anything like that I maybe would have done in the past to give me some real crisp seams. I've used flat as one of my favourite things to use if that's something you've not heard of before. But I thought I'll give this a try, and I'll not use any of the spray products to help flatten the seams, and I'll just see how I go with this and see if it gives me a nice finish. And so far the blocks that I've got packed away do seem really crisp and flat, so far so good. Right, once I've done these last 4, we're moving on to a slightly different piece, which looks like it's going to be the other side to these triangles, and it's going to make a square. Then I've got 2 squares that join together to make a rectangle, so it looks like we're not too far off finishing this month's block. And I think because they've all been the same, it's been 8 similar blocks, it's actually gone together really quickly. Still got a couple of clues left to do that, so let's see. There's still time for me to make a mistake. Right, so what I'll do is just push that out of the way to grab my next pieces. So I'm taking my large triangle A, which for me is the white fabric, and my pink fabric, which is fabric D, and I'm sewing them together like so. Now, telling me I'm sewing them all 16 the same way, so I'm not having to think about them being in reverse, which I think we had to do maybe in clue 1. We did so many one way and then so many another way because they went on opposite corners. So this is a little bit easier. Again, I've got the issue of my white fabric, so if you're doing quartz, you need to remember that your fabric A does have a right side and a wrong side. It's very, very faint, and if you put one in the wrong way, you're probably not really going to notice, unless you're really, really picky. But in a whole quilt, once it's laid out, you wouldn't notice. But there's definitely the print is on one of the sides, and when they come to you, if it's an even number like 8 or 16 for instance, they will be sent to you as a pair with the outside fabric on the right, you know, the right side fabric on the outside of either pair. So the right side is on top, and then the next one you just have to flip over, and that's the right side. I'm going to see if maybe on the close-up camera, I'm just going to pick up a piece of fabric and just see if you can see this, because it is quite interesting. I don't know if the light will pick it up. Ah, look there, you can just see. I think that's the one with the swallow on it. But it's very difficult to see, so this is where I might be squinting a little bit just to make sure that it looks okay. Right, so I'm putting these two together with A on the left and D on the right. So I wanted to make sure that A is right side up, and then I'm just going to pop a pink triangle D over the top of it, and I'm going to be sewing down this seam here. So I'll just bob those onto the sewing bed, and that's all 16. I've just got to remember to take one and then flip the next one over, and they'll all be the right way. Flip that over. Make sure I'm keeping my triangle the right way as well. Again, I'm just roughly putting the A and the D triangle together. I'm not neatening them up until I actually get to the sewing machine and the needle, because chances are, knowing me, I'd knock them off the sewing machine bed and I'd have to neaten them all up again anyway. So there we go. Feels like there's more than 16 here, but I know there's not. I counted them before. Right, last two, and then we can sew. Yeah, I did turn that last one over. Right, so, and then all I'm doing is making sure that I've got the white underneath, the pink on top for me, and I'm sewing down this right hand seam with the point going into the machine first. You need to be careful that you're just sewing down the right seam when you're doing chain piecing like this, because if you sew down the other seam, you'll end up with the wrong layout of the triangles together. So it's worthwhile checking if you're a bit unsure before you do all 16. You just do one, open it out, and then make sure it looks like your image. Yeah, A and D that way. I'd hate to do all 16 and then have to unpick all 16 on video, especially seeing as we're live and we won't be editing it out. So right, good to go. I was just making sure no one had asked any questions, because I'm not sure if the machine will make a little noise at me or if I'll get a notification, because this is the first time I've done an actual live on YouTube. I've done, you might know, I've done a few videos and uploaded those. And if you're looking for month 2, if you're sewing along with me and you were just wanting some tips or anything on month 2 was the month we had the disaster with the live and actually streaming to Facebook. It really was not happy with me at all, and to be fair, I'm totally jinxed with technology most of the time. So we've got a video to upload, but I just haven't had a chance to get it onto YouTube yet. So I have done a video. It's probably a little bit more of an edited video than a full live, but I'll hopefully get that up in the next couple of days, and then at least it's there in the archives to go along with the rest of the clues. But for anyone that is sewing along and doing Mystery Quilt with me this time, I'd love to know if you've got any suggestions on things you would like to do, because obviously I'm doing these live videos, but I know in the past I've done other things that have worked really well, where I've done little Zoom meetings that are not necessarily based around sewing, just chats for sew-alongs that we've had. They've been really successful. So if you'd like some other type of community gathering, I'm certainly up for looking at something like that. If you'd like to get to know the other people that are sewing along the mystery quilt with you, I think it's always nice. And sometimes obviously we've got a couple of groups over on Facebook. There's Sheila's Big Worldwide Mystery Quilt Facebook group and Facebook page, and I've got Clued Up Quilters, that's for anyone doing any of my particular colourways of mystery quilt with me. But I know not everyone's on Facebook, although a lot of people are. A lot of people are on Instagram, but if you'd prefer to do something like a Zoom or whatever, then it's always nice to catch up with you all and see what you're doing, even if it's other things. Right, I think I'm down to my last 2, and then it'll be another 16 blocks of pressing. With this we are pressing towards A, which for me is the white fabric, so I'll just move off my first half of the squares. And then it's just more of the same. Pressing the seam. I'm going towards it so I can do them that way. It's a slightly bigger triangle, so I probably won't get all 3 under the block at once. Oh, got them the wrong way around. I'm pressing towards A, aren't I? So I want A on top, and then it just makes it easier to push into the seam and press it. There we go. I'm just going to pile those up on top of the last set. There was a notification of something there, not sure what that was. Certainly wasn't YouTube, so we're alright. The nice thing about this sewing as well is normally and hopefully sometime soon I would take this kind of thing to my guild meeting, because as you can see I don't need loads of equipment. I've got my small pressing board which is adequate for these size blocks. You know, even the blocks don't tend to themselves end up being really big, so I can have my pressing mat just at the side of me. I've got my block and my little iron, obviously my sewing machine, and a pair of snips, and that's really all I've been using so far today. So when we're allowed to, which hopefully will be very soon, when we're allowed to go places and sew, here in the UK anyway, we're keeping our fingers crossed that things are going to start happening again soon and we'll be allowed to meet up. Then it's kind of like Mystery Quilt for that very reason, in that I don't need to think about lots of things. I can just pick up my boxes, my clues, take them with me. And it's maybe an hour or two's worth of sewing, depending on how much chatter and how much tea drinking, how many distractions I get in between. I imagine the first time we get to go to a guild or a sewing day together, I cannot imagine there'll be much sewing happening, to be fair. Keeping our fingers crossed for retreat later on this year. I mean, I take projects with me to retreat, but I never do any sewing. So I don't think this year will be any different if we get to go. Right, while I'm doing this pressing, I'm just going to read ahead and see what step 4 has in store for us. So I'm joining step 3 to step 2 and making 16 identical blocks, so that's nice and easy. So basically these squares that we're making in step 4 are identical, but it looks like we just twist them to join them together to make the rectangle. Yeah, I must say I've seen, I'm trying to think now which I saw a couple pop up this morning, or was it yesterday? And I now don't know, looking at that black and white image, whether it was these or not. I'm sure it was. But it's funny how they look different in all the different colourways. So yeah, if you're not actually doing the large, or you're not doing this particular sew along, but you've just this particular mystery quilt, but you've just dipped into the video just to see what it's all about, it's worthwhile going and having a look at the mystery quilt Facebook group, or search up on Instagram the hashtag mystery quilt, and see the different colourways. And even though they're exactly the same blocks, when you're looking at large, they do look different. Now obviously for anyone who's new to this, I don't want to freak you out, and that probably a bit late telling you this at the end of this block, but the small blocks are different to the large blocks, and that's because the quilt is a different size. The small quilt is rectangular and the square quilt, the large quilt is a square, and so although they look very similar and they've got a very similar design, they are probably constructed differently, and the large one will have slightly different elements to make it bigger and to make it a square. So each month, I don't think so far yet we've come across a month where you're doing similar blocks at all. They have been very different each month. Some months you'll be doing something where both small and large are very similar. But yes, so far, I'm just going to flip that round because I need it to look like the image. Otherwise I won't know that I'm doing it right. So yeah, I've got my B and my F and then D and A, and I'm flipping that over like so. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put it under the machine this way. Now the reason I'm doing this is so that, although you can't see it because it's folded over by when you pressed F towards the C block, if I get my needle so that it goes on the seam exactly there where this point is, and I can feel the ridge in the fabric, even if it's maybe a little bit less than 1/4 of an inch, it might just be because of the bulk of the seam or whatever, but I know that then that is going to give me a nice crisp point there. So what I might do is I might just do one and take it out and press it just to show you and see how accurate my seams are. I'm going to pick one that, because I know a few of my little ones there were just trying to find one where I can see it really well. And what I'm aiming for as well is that the corner of this C square is going to hit that line there. So I'll do one to test it, and then I might know where I need to just adjust it slightly if it's not quite sitting right, and that can be just down to whether you've got a really accurate scant 1/4 inch, which hopefully mine is, but you know, you never know, you can go a bit skew-if. So I'm going to do this one, give it a press and see what it looks like. So it says I'm adding that, and then I'm pressing towards step 2. Right, so I'll reread that when I get to it. So I've moved it to the sewing machine, and all the lining up I just did then has all gone to pot, so I'm just going to readjust it. you might see when I'm starting, I'm just pulling my top thread away because I've got a thread cutter on this machine, so it cuts the thread and leaves the bottom bobbin exactly where it needs to start. But I've just always been in the habit of just giving a little bit of tension to my top thread, just so that it doesn't get sucked into the machine and create any sort of nesting underneath. I've never really had that problem with this machine, if I'm honest, but it's just a little habit I got into with my old machine, where occasionally it might do that. It's just one of those little things. You just have to do one stitch really, but I just usually do a couple of stitches and then let go, and it's just so that I know it's not going to get sucked into the bottom of the machine. And you might have seen I just pulled it a little bit, so I've got maybe a couple of 3 inches there. I probably didn't actually need that much, but I was just pulling it out of the machine and the top bobbin just to give me enough to hold on to. So I'm just going to run down the length of this F triangle, and I'm just going to slow down when I get to the centre point and just make sure the rest of my seam is lining up, because when I go through this point I want to try and be as accurate as I can with where I'm hitting, and it does look to me like I'm maybe just going to have to go a little bit less than 1/4 inch for it not to take off the point of my square. And I'm just seeing that through feeling the fabric and just looking at where the ridge is. If I'd have stuck to 1/4 inch, I might have just lost a fraction of the tip. Right, let me see. Oh, it's slightly off, but it's not too bad, to be honest. It's acceptable for me under what I'm prepared to accept, because I know that when this comes to a whole quilt, I'm not going to see that. It may be that 1 or 2 of them might just need slightly altering, but I'll give this a press and then you can see it better. So it's telling me that I need to press towards step 2, which is these 3. So I'm pressing towards them. So I want those on top. Just going to set the seam, and obviously there I've got the bulk of the 3 fabrics, so I'm making sure that I'm just giving that a good press before I even flip it over to press the seam itself, because I want that to be as flat as possible. So I'm going that way, so I'm just going to nudge into the seam like I have been doing, and when I get to this bit, this is the bit that's going to be sort of fairly chunky. If I give it a good press, it'll be fine. I know there was one of the ladies asking after the first month about pressing open the seams, and Sheila did say that that is fine to do as long as you're doing it throughout the quilt. Sheila's preferred method is just pressing to one side, so she does give, like I've explained before, really good instructions on which way to press, so when you get together and put all of your blocks together, they'll be worked together fine. I've never encountered any problems with any of the previous quilts I've done. So actually, once I've given that a press now, I can see that that is almost spot on. I'm just going to give it a press with that, but I am happy with that. So I just find that with you having quite a lot of fabrics all meeting together at that centre seam, I just need to take my time when I'm running that bit through the machine, and if I'm making sure that my other ends are lined up, it should sit right, as long as I've been fairly accurate with my previous sewing. So away we go. 16 of these to do, well 15 more to do, and then just one seam to attach the 2 squares together, and that's the blocks done. I wonder if I'm going to get 16 as good as that first one. I'll just start off the sewing, and then I'm just making sure that the bottom seam's lined up. Just do a bit of readjusting, and then away we go. You'll see that I'm just doing this by hand as well. I know that, you know, a lot of people like to pin, so if you do like to pin, it's a really good point to start with a pin in your centre point here, and then put a couple of pins either side just to keep your seam running straight. But I prefer to just start it off under the machine and then adjust it and hold it with my fingers, but that's more because I just, you know, I've never been a big fan of a pin unless it's really, really necessary. If anyone saw me doing some sewing the other week, I was doing some dressmaking and I was putting an elasticated cuff on, well, it was on the collar, on the sleeve cuffs, and then on the bottom of the dress, and they all required pinning. So I loved doing the dress, hated the pinning part. So where I can get away with not doing a pin, I will. But sometimes they are required, and if you're fairly new to machine sewing, then I would recommend using them, because it does help with your accuracy, and you know, these things all come with practice and a bit of experience and time. If you're someone who likes things to be really precise as well, then definitely pinning is for you. Like I said, that first block I wasn't sure whether it was going to come out exactly on the point, and it was near enough for me, but for some people they might want it exactly on. I don't think I could have got that any closer if I'm honest, but a few of these might not be quite as accurate. I just slow down and take it a little bit steady when I get to the centre point as well, because it is going through 4 fabrics, and if you end up hitting your actually the tip of the square as well, it's going through a few extra layers, so I just take it steady so that I can try and get it as accurate as I can, and it's just going a little bit slower through all those layers because you've got a few seams that you're going over, but the rest of the time it's just the 2 layers of fabric, so I kind of put my foot down a little bit faster then. Could do with a little pressing assistant, and then as these are coming out the back of the machine, someone could be pressing them on the other side. Only because that's not my favourite bit either. myself a bit confused, and I was thinking I was doing some of them the wrong way, but I don't think I can at this stage. As long as I'm putting them right sides together. Last few now. There's a couple of them as I've been doing them there where it's just felt like a little extra bump or a little extra ridge as I've gone over the centre point, so I've possibly caught the tip of the square doing that, just when you can feel it. If I have done that on any of them, the simple solution is just to unpick a few stitches either side of the centre seam and maybe just look at, do I need to just adjust my seam allowance in a little bit so it's a scant 1/4 inch. To make sure I don't lose the tip of the square, or is it that it's not that noticeable? If you think about it, this is going to be in a 72-inch square, and one tiny little seam like that probably won't be noticeable across the whole quilt. It's how much you think it's going to stand out and how much you can live with when it comes to something like that. They don't have to be perfect. Right, we've got to the end of the 16. Oh no, I've just found another one hiding. Let's see. So down to the last bit now, which is to press these. They're all going towards nudge into the seam, and then I'm looking at that centre point is going to be quite bulky, so I'm looking to give that a really good press. Your iron needs to be a dry iron. You don't want any steam in there, especially with these triangles, because you are dealing with biased edges, so you don't want any steam on those because you don't want to stretch them or anything as you're going. So it's really important that you use a dry iron, and quite a hot one as well. So although I'm saying to you, you want to do really well and press those seams, you don't want to scorch your fabrics either, so just be mindful of that. This little iron I've got's fantastic at the moment, just for this type of job. I do have a bigger iron that I have when I'm like at home, and I have the ironing board set up at the side of me and a big iron. Well, I'm quite pleased with the first 3 blocks so far. Am I going to be as happy with all 16? I don't know. Just making sure I give that centre bit a good press. I'm just using my finger there to sort of turn over the seam as well, just to make sure I'm not putting. You can always turn it over once you've pressed it and give it a press from that side as well, from the underside, if you feel that centre piece is maybe a little bit bulky. If you want to just really flatten it down. I would recommend that you make sure that you do follow the press instructions as much as you can as you're going through, and when you've finished, you give your blocks a really good press before you put them away. I would imagine that when you get all of your blocks out in month 10, maybe going to have to give them a little press, depending on if you've managed to keep them all perfectly flat. I don't know if you saw, but I've got one of Sarah Ashford's pouches now. I went for the bigger pouch this time because I knew that really most of Sheila's blocks would fit in the pouch flat, and I wouldn't have to sort of fold them up or anything. In the past I've maybe put a few blocks together and just folded them in half or rolled them or something, but they do require another press when you come to the end, which just feels like another job sometimes. But I'm hoping this time, if I give them a good press and put them away and keep them flat, I might avoid that extra step. Something you would have thought I would have learnt after all these years of doing mystery quilt. I found some photographs just the other day. I dug out an old phone and I was looking through the photos just to check that they were all stored. I back everything up and I was just checking that they were all stored before I sort of deleted anything off the phone, and I found pictures of the first mystery quilt that we did. I'll have to try and get them downloaded and put them up on Instagram and Facebook for people to see. I'm sure the quilt's hanging up here somewhere. It's still an unfinished quilt though, unfortunately. I do seem to do a lot of quilt tops and not really get to the finishing quilting stage. Maybe that needs to be my challenge for this year, is to get a load of these mystery quilts finished. Right, I think we're nearly at the end. I say that, I think there's about another 5 or 6 here. That'll take a couple of minutes though. I'm going to trim them all now. Maybe 7. I am pleased with them all so far, I must say. I was even doubting my own accuracy there. I'm not sure why, but I think I was just a bit unsure about that point on the square, but I think I've managed to get it on most of the ones I've pressed so far, so I'm very happy with that. If you when you're sewing it up you encounter any problems, you know, you can just message or see if there's anyone else in the group that's having issues, and if you've maybe want some tips on trying to get your points more accurate if you do find you struggle. Usually a lot of time it's down to whether you're sewing an accurate 1/4 inch seam, so as we always say, it's worthwhile testing that before you start each month. But there's always plenty of people in the group who like to give help and tips or share bits of advice. That's what the group's there for, isn't it, at the end of the day? And to share your blocks as well. People love to see what everyone else is doing. So I will try and get some decent pictures today of these blocks and put them in the group myself, because I'm just as bad myself for not putting up pictures. I take pictures and then don't always put them up, which seems a bit daft really. Right, this is the last one, so we start to lay them out now to do, oh no, wrong way. Lay them out to do the final layout. So it says sew pairs of step 4s together as shown, just to one side. Oh, that's interesting. The final measurement. Got to see if they measure correctly. I mean, at this stage she actually confirms that it should measure 6.5 inch square. It's looking pretty square. The test will be, is my seam allowance accurate? And how have I done with my scant 1/4 inch? In so much as, has it worked out at 6.5 inch? I'm just looking for my ruler. Oh, here it is. I'm just going to get one of the blocks. 1 inch there. It's hard to see on the white table. Well, maybe just fractionally out. Maybe 1/8 of an inch. So maybe my seam was a bit too big today and it needs to be a little bit more scant. But I can kind of compensate for that in this final seam by making sure it is very much a scant 1/4 inch. I obviously need to make sure that I'm catching both blocks together and I'm not going to risk them coming apart at all, but I can make sure that this one is a scant one. So the layout is that I have my F and my C in one direction and then my F and C in the other direction. Yep, B, A, D, D, A, B. Yep, that's right. So I want my blocks to look like that, so I'm just going to lay another one out. Like so. Right, so what I will be doing is, move that out of the way. I'm going to be sewing these two together down here, so I'm just going to flip that over so they're right sides together, and that is going to go into the machine, and I'm sewing down here. So where these seams now meet, so where the square and the triangle meet, the seams are now going in opposite directions, so you'll be able to do what's called nesting your seams. So what I'll do is when I go to the sewing machine with the first block in a second, I'll show you what I mean by that. If you've not done machine sewing with patchwork before and you've not nested your seams, then I'll just quickly show you what it looks like. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pile up all these pairs so I know that I've got them all the right way around, because I think if I don't do that now I'll end up with one turned the wrong way, because this is definitely a visual thing for me, is this. I'm just going to follow the guide and pile them all up so that, yeah, I can definitely see me sewing one of these the wrong way around if I don't. And obviously the diagrams in the instructions are sort of in a grayscale, black, white and grey, because we have many different colourway options between myself and Kim and Jenny over at Cotton Cuts, and so it's not possible to print out the instructions with the different colourways on, which is why we tell you that you have to keep your colour card to hand all throughout the quilt, because that's your reference point. And obviously the instructions include all the lettering that means that you know which fabric should be where. But for me, I'm a bit of a visual person, so for me I've got to really look at that and think, okay, that's what the block looks like, rather than matching up the colours, which you might do on just a single quilt pattern. You might look at something and it might actually have the fabric representation there. So I'm just going to take this first block to the camera over on the sewing machine, just get rid of those threads, to show you, hopefully I can show you what this nesting will look like. So let's bring my arm around here. So I'm sewing down this seam here, and I've got the join between the black and white fabric and the pear fabric, and then it's the opposite way underneath, and where the two meet you should be able to get them to butt up exactly to each other, and that's called nesting. Now if I was to move it so that the seams actually overlap, so the black and white is over the black and white, now that's not going to be right, and it's not going to give me an accurate point underneath, but I can feel between my finger and my thumb that there's a ridge there, and if I just kind of, with my nail, if I just move it up, I can feel it drop into place, and that's something that you just need to do, you know, and practice yourself, and you'll feel it. Now if it was too far apart, with my nail I can feel there's a ridge and a little gap between the two, so again that's not going to give me an accurate point, so I just need to move it up until I can feel that they're right next to each other. Now again, for anyone who's a new sewer, I would recommend putting a pin in there, and then what you want to do is you then want to go to the beginning part of your, where you're going to be sewing your seam, and if you're accurate and you know your sewing's spot on, it should meet at the top, which is where you're going to start sewing. And similarly, if you come down to the bottom of the seam, your corner points should meet there as well. But if you're just wanting it to stay in place so that you feel happy that it's not going to move and you're going to get an accurate point on this seam, stick a pin in there, and maybe stick a pin in the end if you want to. All I'm going to do is start sewing, and I'm just going to keep my finger on that. Fabric has a little bit of sort of giving it a bit of ease, so you can always so I've got over the centre point there, I know that that's secure, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull this fabric down so that the corners are meeting up, and I'm just going to stick my finger on that bottom point, keep it taut so that it's nice and flat, and let the machine take the fabric through, and obviously just move my finger away before we get to the end. So if you feel like you want to pin, maybe when you're piling them all up there, you can do your pinning at that point, and then literally you can just pick up from your pile and bob them under the sewing machine needle. Because I'm not pinning, and I'm just gonna adjust it as I bob it under the needle, just to make sure I'm happy that it's that centre point is meeting, because that's my crucial point. Right. feel like I've got through those really quickly, but I guess it's only 8 blocks this time because I'm piecing all of the 16 together to give me just the 8 finished blocks. Right, and that should be clue 6. What I will do is I will just trim and press the first one. So again, trying to stick to trimming away all the little threads. So press as shown. So press to one side now. It shows it with an arrow going a particular way. So I'm just going to press it like so, as in the instructions. So just set the final seam, nudge it like so, give it a good press, and then what I would probably recommend at this stage is, as I was saying just before, if it's going to go away and it's going to be in a box for, what are we now, 5-6 months, I'm just going to turn it over and press those seams. You can see, like, I've just got a little ridge in there. I'm just going to give them another press just to get them nice and flat, and also with my centre seam, because obviously at the top here you've got a few fabrics that are all together there, so it's good to just get it nice and flat. And away we go. So flip it over. Is that what it's supposed to look like? DDCC, yes. And there I have 8 blocks that look like identical like the one on the pressing board. So I won't bore you on the final stage with pressing all 8. I will do that and pack them away in my lovely pouch, ready for next month. I've got my little tags that I will be using to identify those, and obviously for anyone who is sewing along with me, Mystery Quilts from Modern Quilt Club, you should have these in your pouch. If for any reason you receive a box and you've not got them in, just let me know and I'll post you some on. I do find that sometimes I'm packing the boxes up and I get to a point and I think, did I put any cards in those ones? And I have to go back through and double check them. So if you're ever missing any, just let me know and I'll post you some out. But they are really important for tagging up each individual block, because you will need that when we get to month 10 and we're putting it all together and it's like a big jigsaw puzzle. So yeah, I think that is all the sewing. How did we do for time today? I think we were maybe just short of an hour and a half, which I think for that amount of sewing is not too bad today. So hopefully that's given you a bit of an insight in what's involved in clue 3, or it's given you a bit of a taster for what Mystery Quilt is all about and what's involved in it. It's not too difficult, hopefully. I hope I've shown you that at least anyway. If you've any questions, drop them in the comments below on the video, or you can message me over on Instagram or on the website, or on Facebook, obviously, in the couple of groups we've got there. And make sure that if you are sewing, you do upload your pictures and share them with everyone else, because it's great to see those. So that's it from me for this month, so I will hopefully catch you in a month's time. I'm not sure of the date, I can't see the calendar from here, I've not got my glasses on, but I will put up a post in the group and let you know. Okay, thank you, bye bye.